Hey guys, HP here, and the build I wanted to share with you today is going to be good for regular and in-game content. You will have almost 100% uptime on blinding effects. Let's get started. Let's go! Okay, so the super is personal preference. I typically take Chaos Reach to do more damage to bigger enemies, but you can take Storm Trance for add clear if you want. Moving on to class ability, I personally take Healing Rift for that extra survivability, but we do have other ways to survive and heal, so Empowering Rift is perfectly fine here. Melee isn't really going to matter too much either, but you can take Lightning Ball if you want some extra range. Now, the grenade that you want to take is Flashbang, and we will have it up a lot of the time. This is part of the reason why I said we have other survivability options. Enemies will be blinded most of the time with this build, and it's good for higher tier stuff because blinding effects stun unstoppable champions. Moving on to the aspects, I take Arc Soul because it helps the whole team and will almost always be supercharged because we will always be amplified. And for the second aspect, we of course run Electrostatic Mind because defeating targets with arc abilities or jolted and blinded targets will create an Ionic Trace, which because of our fragment, our grenade will be blinding and jolting, so we will always have Ionic Traces tracking to us, which also makes us amplified, feeding into the Arc Soul. Now on to the fragments. The first one is going to be Spark of Discharge. Our arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an Ionic Trace, which with the way our weapons are set up, we will always be killing with an arc weapon, and you'll see in a second why it's better than normal. The next fragment we have is Spark of Shock. Arc grenades will jolt targets, so now on top of our grenades blinding targets, they will now also jolt them, causing them to take additional damage and chain lightning to nearby targets. And this also stuns overload champions, so with grenades alone, we can now stun 2 different champions. And our weapons will be able to handle the third, Barrier. The next fragment is going to be Spark of Beacons. While amplified, which we always will be, our arc special weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. This pairs well with any arc specials, but one of my favorites, in the one I showcase in this build, is Forbearance from the Vow of Disciple raid. Being a wave frame grenade launcher, you have a line effect and a lot more spread to get a final blow, which can create a much larger blinding explosion with this weapon. For the last fragment, and this one might be a bit overkill, but we are here to keep enemies blinded 100% of the time. So we chose Spark of Brilliance. Defeating a blinded target with precision damage creates a blinding explosion. And obviously, since everything will already be blinded, once you defeat another target with precision damage, the surrounding enemies will refresh their blinded effect, staying in a perpetual state of being blinded. Okay, now on to our weapons. For the first slot, I chose the Lodbrok C, which can roll with Osmosis and Adrenaline Junkie. Osmosis is when you throw a grenade, this weapon turns into that damage type, so now we have an arc primary in the kinetic slot. And then Adrenaline Junkie gives bonus damage and handling after a grenade final blow. So since we are constantly throwing blinding grenades, this will always be arc and will always have the bonus damage and handling. Also, since this season is anti-barrier auto rifle, you are now already complete in having the capability to stun all 3 champion types. For the energy weapon slot, we of course are going with Forbearance. I'm running mine with Stats for All and Rampage, but Chain Reaction also works really well here. As for the heavy weapon, you can really run whatever you want. I'm just running a Thunderlord because it fits the theme, and I needed an exotic slot anyway. Moving on to the gear. The exotic piece of gear, of course, we're using the chest piece, the new and improved Vesper of Radius. That makes your Rift periodically release arc shockwaves and they create an arc explosion. But if you have an arc subclass on, this explosion will, you guessed it, blind nearby targets. So if you find yourself surrounded and need to regen, cast your Rift, and while you are healing, the enemies will not be attacking you because they will be blinded. As for our armor mods, the most important ones are going to be Arc Siphon in your helmet, because this one will give us orbs of power upon getting arc weapon final blows, and because of the Osmosis perk, every single weapon we have is arc. In the arms, we went Fastball and 2 copies of Bolstering Detonation, so we can get our Rift faster when we do damage with our grenade. In the legs, I'm running 1 Arc Surge and 1 Elemental Surge, since we will be getting a ton of Ionic Traces, and then 1 Recuperation, which you can swap out for 1 Better Already, whichever you prefer. And this is where the armor mods really come together on the class ability. I have 1 Reaper and 1 Bomber to play into us using the class ability and the grenade so much. And 1 Powerful Attraction, because you're going to be generating Orbs of Power with your arc weapons, and then casting your Rift to blind enemies, and getting it back with the grenade damage, which also blinds them, and having Better Already or Recuperation just tops off this loop of enemies being blinded and you healing through almost anything. And I think that this build really survives beyond this season, but this season's mods do really help. So if you want to check out the seasonal mods, we have Authorized Mods Arc, which obviously are going to make your Arc mods a little bit cheaper. And then the other one that's going to matter a little bit is Amped Up, Stay Amplified Longer, which we're going to always be amplified anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but being amplified longer does help a little bit. And then we have Thunderous Retort. Again, doesn't really matter, but it grants bonus arc super damage if cast while critically wounded or while amplified, which we will always be amplified, so we will get a little bit bonus damage on that Chaos Reach, so pretty good. And Countercharge is going to be pretty good as well, because we do have all 3 ways to stun all 3 types of champions. And of course, Amplified Shielding, gain damage resistance while amplified. We will almost always be amplified, so this also helps. And finally, Lightning Strikes Twice. After throwing an Arc Grenade, gain increased grenade recharge for a short time. Arc Final Blows extend the duration of this benefit, and everything that we have is Arc, and we will be throwing a Blinding Grenade constantly. So we will almost always have our grenade up. If you would like to copy this build directly from Dim to your character, check the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like if you enjoyed and subscribe for more Destiny and other gaming content.